When I was at Condo last week, I tested all the things that bugged me about the Sony a7 III on the new a7R Mark IV to see if any of them were fixed, and I'm happy to report that many of them were, and this has me pretty excited about future Sony releases. Let's get undone. Gerald Undone. He's crazy. What's happening, everybody? I'm Gerald Undone, and all I want is the perfect camera. So this is just going to be a short little video updating you on some of the well-known Sony quirks. Now, I've made a lot of videos on these quirks, but I also had the opportunity to talk to the design team and give product feedback when I was at Condo about some of the things that I'd like to see fixed in future revisions. And during that feedback session, I went through the a7R4 right in front of them to see if I could recreate the things that annoyed me about the a7 III and see which ones were fixed and which ones still remained. And here's my report. First up, those little silly dangly flaps on the side of the input outputs are gone. Now they just open from the side, and this is much better. Not only apparently are they more weather sealed, but the layout is better now too, because on the previous edition, they were really a pain in the butt if you were trying to use a cage, and sometimes you couldn't even open them if you had a cage on. Well, now that's a lot better, and the layout pairs the headphones, the microphone, and the HDMI cable all in the same section, so you might only need to actually open up the one flap instead of having all three dangle down. The only feedback I provided about this was to continue to strive to fit a full-size HDMI Type A port in there if possible, but otherwise, great work. The new SD card compartment is better now too, with both slots being UHS 2 and with a more logical order with card 1 being on top instead of on the bottom. They've also made the grip deeper on the a7R4, which I appreciate because I have big hands, but most of the people that I talked to at Condo agreed that it did feel better in the hand, regardless of their hand size. Now let's talk about a major improvement that has me extremely excited for what it means for future releases like the a7S III. You guys know I don't like camera rumors, but I think it's safe to say that this is likely a good indication of what we'll see in that future mythical body, and hopefully any other cameras to follow as well. When you connect a monitor to the a7R4 over HDMI and you're recording 4K internally, the face detection does not disable itself anymore. You can still use it. And what's better is it's not just face detection, it's also now active eye tracking in video as well. And when you do start recording, neither screen blacks out. Remember how I made that video demonstrating that if you record with an external monitor, that the LCD on the camera turns off and you can only see it on the external recorder when you're recording? That doesn't happen anymore. You can record to both the internal card and the external recorder at the same time, keep both screens on, and have face and eye detection while doing it. This is huge, and I'm really glad to see changes like this. But while we're on that topic, there are still a few software issues that do persist in the a7R4 that I did bring up and demonstrate during that product feedback session. First, the face detection does still turn off when you have proxy recording enabled, which makes me think that might also still be the case with having the app connected. I wasn't able to test the app portion of it, but those are two things that would disable face detection in the previous cameras when you had an HDMI cable going to a monitor, would be if you enabled proxy recording or had the app connected. And so far, my tests on the a7R4 show that those problems still persist. Another one is that you can't use HDMI info display when in 4K. So if you set your camera to 4K recording and then you go over to HDMI options, you can't turn on info display, which is the ability to display your on-screen display and your menus and that kind of stuff on the external monitor. You can't do that in 4K, you have to be in 1080p. That still persists. And the other problem is that when you do have HDMI info display put over on the monitor, the LCD screen turns off. So if you're showing your menus or your on-screen display on an external source, your main camera screen is no longer active, it's just black. Those problems still persist as well. And I explained this in the product feedback session that it's kind of annoying because that means if you're using your monitor slightly removed from the camera, you can't actually see both sources at the same time because this screen is black. You're going to have to peek around at the monitor, which means two people can't really view the same thing in two different places if both are going to have the on-screen display. So they seem to document that down, and hopefully they'll work on that in future releases because I would like to see more versatility with the HDMI info display output options, both in 4K and with having both screens on concurrently. And hopefully it's doable because they were able to fix that for the recording, not having a blackout. So maybe they can do it on info display as well. Lastly, another issue that still persists that I brought up that annoys me quite a bit is the inability to set a custom white balance when you're on one of your memory states like 1, 2, or 3. If you set it to M, manual, on either photo or video, then you can go into white balance and take a capture of a white balance card and set a custom white balance. But if you're in 1, 2, or 3, that option's grayed out, which means in order to set a custom white balance, if say you were on 2, you had all your favorite settings on 2, and that's how you shoot, but now you want to set a custom white balance, you have to go back out to M, then set the custom white balance, and then re-register those settings to 2 in that case. And this is a big waste of time where most other cameras you can set a custom white balance while you're in their saved memory states. So I brought this up in the feedback session and hopefully they'll address that because it's just a time waster and in my opinion seems unnecessary. Seems like just a little bit of changes in software should be able to fix that. So that's pretty much it. There's other little minor things that I'm going to test when I get my copy of the camera, but those are the major things that I wanted to check to see if they were fixed during the limited time that I had with it. I was also pretty excited by the new 35mm f1.8 lens, which I got to test for a couple hours. Not long enough to give you my full impressions of it, but it does seem pretty good. But I'm going to be making a full-length video on that and comparing it to the other 35mm f1.2 option from Sigma that's coming out for Sony as well, and just make a full comparison video of those two lenses. But the 35mm f1.8 does seem pretty promising for the couple hours that I had it. Also, you'll notice that I was showing some Instagram story footage during this video, and that's because all of these updates were posted to Instagram while I was at Condo, while I was discovering them. So if you're not following my Instagram yet, I highly recommend that you do, because often I post these little peeks of what I'm testing before I get the opportunity to make a proper YouTube video. Overall, I'm happy with these changes. There's still some improvements to be made, but Sony's definitely on the right track, and I'm excited to see what they come up with next, whether that be the a7S III or something else. But that's going to be it for me. I hope you found this video helpful or at least entertaining, and if you did, make sure you leave it the old thumbs up and consider subscribing if you haven't already. But if you did not find this video helpful or entertaining, feel free to hit the dislike button twice. Alright, I'm done.